Hello and welcome to the Career Services presentation on cover letters by Northern Kentucky University. Let's get started. First, it's good to ask, what is a cover letter? This is a letter that introduces you to an employer, and it's the cover for your resume. So back when you would always mail your resume, the cover letter would serve to introduce why you're sending something to that employer and let them know what you're looking for. So even though now you're mostly applying for positions online, it's still good to keep up the tradition of including a cover letter. Some of the basic requirements are that we recommend that you always send a cover letter whenever you can. This shows the employer that you're really interested and that you respect the traditions of the job search. It's really important that you customize your letters. Sending the same cover letter to every employer will not be effective in your job search. But you really want to take the time to write a good letter and express how you would be the right fit for that particular employer or that particular position. It could make all the difference in your job or internship search. When thinking about getting started, we recommend that you look at our cover letters and other job search correspondence guide, as well as the cover letter outline. These can help give you some ideas of how to get started, and also look at the sample cover letter in that guide to get an idea of what a cover letter might look like when it's finished. There are some components to this cover letter because it is a formal letter. So you'll want to start with your return address, the date that you're writing that letter, the company name where you're mailing the letter or sending the letter, as well as the personnel name, their position, and the business address. Next, you'll have the salutation, and then the body, which includes the introduction, the main body, and the closing. Finally, you'll have your written name and signature if you're mailing it, or your typed name. And then it's traditional to include the word enclosure to indicate in a mailed letter there's something else in this envelope besides this letter, or the word attachment to indicate in an email that there is something attached to this email, typically which would be your resume. So in the opening paragraph, you're going to express why you're writing that letter. Typically that means that you're including in that paragraph what particular position you're applying for at that organization. You'll want to include how you found out about the organization or the position, and if you have someone who's referred you to that position, for example, an employee at that organization who recommended to you that you should apply, you would mention them in this first paragraph as well. Again, you'll want to see the sample cover letter in our cover letters guide. So here's an example of the beginning portion of a cover letter. So you'll see that it starts with 85 Nunn Drive. So this represents your return address, so your street address, and then the date of mailing the letter. And then you see it's addressed specifically to the person who will be receiving it. If you don't already know from the job posting who will be receiving your letter, then you can call that employer and ask to whom you should address your cover letter. So you see that it's got that person's name, written very formally, Mr. J.B. Price, personnel manager, that's the person's title, and then the name of the organization and the street address or the mailing address. Next, you'll see there's a salutation, Dear Mr. Price. This should always be addressed to the formal way of writing their name, Mr. Price, not Dear J.B. And then a colon is also more formal than a comma, which you would more traditionally put in this salutation. Only if you actually know that person very well and call them by their first name should this part of the letter be addressed to someone directly to their first name. If they have a title that would be appropriate, Dear Director Price, Dear Principal Price, that would be fine as well. So then you see we have the introductory paragraph. I'm writing to express my interest in the sales trainee position that you posted recently in the Northern Kentucky University Career Services Online Employment Database. I will be graduating from NKU in a few months and am actively seeking a position with a manufacturer of consumer goods. So you see that this expresses what position you're applying for or why you're writing a letter, a little bit more information about where you found the position and why you're interested in it, and is fully customized to this particular employer. Next, you'll go into that middle paragraph, which is really the body of this letter. You'll want to refer to your resume, but don't restate everything that's listed on your resume. You'll want to highlight the skills that are relevant to the organization or the position that you're applying for by referring to the job description. You'll want to really think about and indicate in your letter how you can make a unique contribution to that employer. You want to really be explicit and explain exactly why you should be considered for that position. So here's an example. The letter says, as you will note in my resume, I have had meaningful practical experience in sales with Dillard's in Crestview Hills, Kentucky. In addition, I have completed several courses related to sales while pursuing a major in psychology at NKU. Lastly, as a resident assistant, I developed strong communication and listening skills working with the students in my hall. I believe the combination of my academic background, communication skills, and real-world experience at Dillard's will help me contribute to the ongoing success of Golden Enterprises. So you'll see that this person did not go through every position they've ever held and say, first I was working at Dillard's, then I became a resident assistant, most recently I have been a etc. But instead they drew some common themes, communication skills, listening, their academics, to help draw connections between the past experience of that student and their goals of getting hired by Golden Enterprises. Next, you'll move into the closing paragraph. You'll want to state how and when you plan to follow up. If you have the contact information for that employer, it's really important for you to plan to follow up with them to make sure that they've received your materials and see if they have any questions that you can answer. This is a really great way for you to stand out as a candidate who really cares deeply about that position. It's good in that closing paragraph to also indicate that you would be interested in meeting to discuss that position or that organization, which would typically be an interview, and then to thank them for taking the time to consider your application and read your cover letter. So here's an example of that closing paragraph. The letter says, I would like to explore the sales trainee position with you further. Should you need additional information or wish to set up a time for an interview, please do not hesitate to contact me by telephone or by email. In the meantime, thank you for your time and consideration. Because this is a formal letter, it's traditional to only include your street address in the return address section. And so it's important that in the closing paragraph, you include your telephone number and your email address. If you are using a newer format of cover letter with a header at the top that includes your phone number and email address, then it's less essential for you to include those details in your closing paragraph. Here are some important notes. The cover letter is really the only chance you have to inject some personality into your job application. Resumes, no matter how unique and customized they are still really containing the same information for every candidate. So the cover letter is your chance to really shine as someone who cares about that particular position and employer and really is dedicated to wanting to work there. A good letter will illustrate who you are, the skills you possess, and your communication abilities. The resume is supporting details, but the cover letter is a writing sample with a little bit of personality that shows them more about what you have to offer. So again, it's really important that you take the time to write a really good cover letter. It speaks volumes about who you are and how you will work with their organization professionally. We recommend that you always have someone review your cover letter before you send it. It's important to have someone check for typos, but also just to check for the tone and general feel of your cover letter to make sure that you're conveying what you want to convey. You want to really fully express why you're right for that position in that organization. You'll want to make connections between your past experience and what they're looking for in the future. If you're printing your resume and cover letter, you want to be sure to print them on the same paper so that they feel like documents that match and go together. You'll always want to type all correspondence. You don't want to have anything handwritten, so even the return and mailing address on the envelope should be typed if possible. And then you'll want to keep a file or keep a record of all of your correspondence. This is especially helpful when you're looking at making a new cover letter that you can refer back to an old one or refer back to one that was for a similar type of position and get inspiration, but can also help you keep track of who you have already applied for and where you have already had correspondence. We have a lot of handouts and books in Career Services that can provide you with additional ideas and samples. Also included in the cover letters guide are examples of a thank you letter, a job prospecting letter, an interview confirmation letter, and then several letters referring to the job offer process, all including clarifying, accepting, and declining that job offer. When you feel like you're finished, it's really essential, again, that you make sure that your cover letter is error-free. So we do offer a service to review your cover letter for typos, grammar, formatting, but also for tone and to make sure that it's really clearly highlighting your experiences. So if you would like a cover letter review, simply email it to resumehelp@nku.edu and we would be glad to review it and get back to you. The more information you can provide about the type of position that you're applying for, the better we can review it and provide you with feedback. Thank you, and let us know in Career Services if you have any questions.